working for one or two intelligence services, why not work for three or four? I mean, that we've seen that certainly in my career. I've observed that kind of pattern.
You two are the experts on this story, much more than me. There's lots of question marks when it comes to how Epstein acquired his wealth. How did he go from maths teacher to billionaire financier without some sort of career history to speak of?
If you go back to sort of origins of wealth and everything with Epstein, if there are gaps there, they may well be filled by this very large amount of Soviet assets and wealth that came out towards the end of the 1980s. I certainly think that's how Maxwell was funding himself at the time. And of course, it's said that Ghislaine was basically his chosen heir in terms of his business and other political contacts.
He said it on the record. He said, my family will get nothing. He said this in an interview. The only people who will get money are my youngest son, I'm blanking on his name right now, who he felt like was most like him, and Ghislaine, who was his friend. But I was wondering, do you have any evidence to suggest that Epstein was an intelligent asset, or at least a tipster at the very least?
No, as I say, nothing specific, although, as I say, Maxwell definitely was. And, that association, to my mind, looking at it through the lens of an experienced intelligence officer, suggests that was what was going on.
I think what a lot of people do in the intelligence agencies, and I'm not saying this from experience, but he had secrets on people. I mean, he created this bacchanal type of experience. Ghislaine Maxwell helped make it seem posh and normal with her pedigree. And then he had compromise, essentially, right? I mean, he then at the end, he's like, okay, you have to invest in my fund. And they would be like, wait, what? And he's like, that girl was 15. You know what I'm saying? Like, or he would be like, that he knew that what they were up to was disreputable and that he could use it against them.
Yeah, and it's the MO of the old KGB. This is how they operated, as we know. They used more stick than carrot, although there was always an element of both in play. So it kind of strikes me that his MO was almost that of an intelligence officer from an unpleasant regime like Russia, and there are definitely sort of overlaps here from what you're saying.
I mean, this is based on interviews I've had with victims, but just seeing the pattern and hearing to people talking about him, it didn't seem like that sophisticated of an operation. I think sometimes Epstein gets more credit than he deserves. I think he laundered money, but I also think he used blackmail regularly, and he used the girls as pawns in his blackmail scheme.
Yeah, and frankly, the KGB often wasn't very subtle in the way it operated. So again, I wouldn't say that's a counter-argument for this. It does strike me that this is something that people should be turning over and looking into in some detail. Just to establish, for example, whether Ghislaine Maxwell first met Epstein through her father or not. I mean, that's your first starting point, I would have said.
It's been so difficult to try to, I've spent a year investigating Robert Maxwell, and it's just really difficult to establish that connection, that he was the one to introduce them. I mean, it's like thought to be, like you said, it's presumed, but there's no clear-cut evidence. But all we know is that after Robert died, Ghislaine ends up in New York in Epstein's arms, living in a $20 million mansion.
Yeah, and as you say, she was quite clearly the successor for Maxwell in all his various business and other dealings, government dealings. So it all adds up to quite a powerful kind of theory, really, I think.
Yeah, and he actually sent Ghislaine out there to do some of his business. Like she would sell corporate gifts. I mean, what does that even mean? But he looked at her as a very shrewd operator like him. She was beautiful. She was disarming. And he was very proud of her. He brought her around and treated her like he was his wife, almost like how Trump is with Ivanka. He liked that you would see her on his arm and the wife over in the corner.
Yeah, I know. I've seen those photos, and that's very odd. I mean, it just doesn't strike you as normal behaviour.
No.
And Chris, if Russia does indeed have the compromat on the Epstein files, does that potentially unlock the mystery as to Donald Trump's sympathy towards Putin for all these years?
Well, we were talking about it earlier. I don't think it's quite that simple. I think Trump admires
But the
Putin.
question has always been, what has Putin got on Trump?
Yeah.
Could this be it?
Well, quite possibly. I mean, I do believe he has things on Trump. But I also believe that Trump admires Putin and wants to run, as I've said, America in the way that, as an oligarchy, in the way that Putin's running Russia.
Yes, agreed. I do think that as well. He's always admired him. And I think he's the one leader he's actually afraid of.
Well, that's very odd because Putin's a very sinister man, but he's sitting on a country which is declining in its power and influence in the world almost by the week. He has an set of armed forces that have failed to prevail over a second or third rate power on its border, which is not a great, role model to hold up for any country. And I think that the Chinese in particular are very conscious of that. And I'm surprised that, Trump looking at this, not wanting to be associated with losers and all the rest of it, is quite so, euphoric about Putin, or at least has been until very recently, described, after all, was it not the invasion of Ukraine in 2022 as an act of genius at the time? I think that was the quote. Coming back to haunt them all.
Chris, do come back again. And thanks so much.
With pleasure. Good to see you.
So, T, that's the first time you've spoken to Chris Steele. I've interviewed him a number of times. He is someone that I used to WhatsApp from the Sky News studio when I was on air, whenever there was a breaking Russia story, and I would I'd get him down the line, or I'd get him to give me, information or his analysis. So I always find him a fascinating chat. So on the Epstein story, which I know is going to consume your week again this week and probably next week as well, T.
Yeah.
You are such an expert.
Probably until the Republicans come back, and then when they don't release that, when they don't do another hearing or they don't release the files, I don't think it's going away.
Okay,
by
so
the way.
just explain why. Why is this not going away for Donald Trump? Why are MAGA so fixated on these files?
I don't even know that it's necessarily MAGA anymore. I think they're starting to give him slack. I just think the more you give them piecemeal and you don't give them the full Monty, which they were basically promised, it's like they're just trying to release the pressure valve bit by bit, but it just doesn't work. I mean, people were expecting all of it. What are you trying to hide? MAGA has long been conspiratorial. Give them everything. That's what you said you would do. And so that's where I think that they're going to be dealing with a lot of blowback.
And if Trump doesn't give them what they're asking for, essentially the Epstein files, is this going to become a problem for him? How much of a problem?
It already is. I mean, 49% of Republicans, according to a CBS poll, say they're unhappy with how he's dealing with the Epstein files. That's not a good number. We're going into a midterm election. People who vote in those elections tend to be more MAGA, very hardcore base voters. Yeah, this was really, really poorly handled. It's a scandal of their own making. It is a scandal of their own making.
But it's one of those stories that you kind of don't see coming as being the downfall of someone, a bit like Hillary's emails, before the 2016 election.
Which they're trying to bring back to life. They're like resurrected.
There was Hillary's emails that were then, exposed by the FBI just weeks before people voted, which I didn't see coming and was just extraordinary. And then you've got now the Epstein files really causing big problems, it seems, for Donald Trump. And I just wouldn't have guessed this.
In fact, I was doing a lot of interviews before it actually dropped. And on the day it dropped, I had done a few days earlier an interview with the Daily Beast. And I was explaining, they're lying. There's no Epstein list. They obviously don't know what they're talking about. This is they're in over their head on this story. Pam Bondi is and I was explaining it, and literally that weekend, and it just exploded. But yeah, and I had called law enforcement sources earlier, and I was like, what are you guys going to do? Are you working on cases? And they said, yeah, we are. We have footage, we have pictures. And then kaput. And I went back to that source and I was like, what the hell? Why did you say that you were working on stuff? And it's like, we handed what we could to the DOJ and we left it to them. I was like, wow, okay. So somebody said, shut it down.
Wow. Interesting. T, we'll definitely be talking about this again. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for grabbing Christopher Steele. That was interesting.
Yeah, it was really good listen. Really good listen. T, great to have you back. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for watching. We'll see you next week.
And subscribe, rate, share it with your friends. Your support means so much to us. And this is how we keep providing content for you.
And growing as an independent channel. Thank you so much, guys. See you next week.